And obviously you mentioned feedback over there as far as like when you're looking at things that fans like in the beta, and how do you sort of do the balancing act in terms of listening to what fans want and at the same time like sort of going overboard, because obviously not everything like people want might be like doable or good for the game. How do you sort of balance that out?
Yeah, I guess that's where wisdom and experience comes in. So when you have a beta with even just a few thousand people, and we had more than that, there's usually more information you get back than you can actually consume, let alone act on. There's just more lines of feedback given than anyone actually has time to read. So we would try to find the stuff, that kept coming up over and over again and try to address that. But addressing too much is actually, it's a complex issue because people playing the beta still don't have a sense of the entire game. There's still features that are in development when the beta starts or not quite tuned and so on. So people will give feedback, really good feedback sometimes, very intelligent, very thoughtful of what's in front of them. We as the designers have to keep in mind what those players can't know yet. And we have to make sure that we're making choices that have long-term consequences that everyone wants. So, a good example of that would be you can't just give everybody the best item in the game in the first hour of the game. Hey, here's absolute top, bow for your demon hunter. Now you're done. Of course, people kind of want that, right? But the idea that they have to earn it to some degree is very important as well. But you can't go the other direction and have the ability to get that top item to be so vanishingly small that only the most extreme, thousands of hours players can actually get those items. So it's the same philosophy I mentioned earlier about having everyone have access to the end game. A metaphor I use for that is everybody gets like your basic two-seater sedan car to drive. That would be like a boring standard item in the game. And you see all these other guys who play for thousands of hours driving around Ferraris. These would be like legendary or full sets of legendary items that they're wearing. We wanted everybody to get a chance to drive that Ferrari, whereas the 1,000-hour players gets to drive maybe a souped-up super Ferrari that you don't get to play. At least you get to try out the hot stuff, and that's why we actually there's guaranteed legendary drops in the game, so everybody gets a chance to try the crazy powerful stuff. And that's really sort of where all that feedback stuff came from, is how do we make sure that everybody gets a chance to try everything, and that's what we were watching for. Those are the numbers that were the most important to us. So when we were being drowned by feedback, we just kept keeping in mind, is everybody getting a chance to try all the fun stuff, and it's not just for the most dedicated people. Likewise, the most dedicated people should get more out of it.
What surprised you guys the most just after the launch in terms of things you learned that maybe you didn't expect, either in terms of either game balance or just fan reaction? What would you say are like the key learning lessons for you guys since the game is launched?
As far as the gameplay stuff goes, I think that obviously the auction house, which we are now removing from the game next week, would be a big example of that we wanted to fix a lot of problems that Diablo II had. We knew players were going to trade, so you wanted to embrace that. And I think that was an example of something that we didn't think thoroughly enough about. So a bunch of the stuff that happened on the economy sort of surprised us. We had no idea that number of people would be participating in the auction house, that so many people would then, as a result, be able to find almost anything they wanted at reasonable prices because it was just being overwhelmed with data. So that was quite the surprise for us, and it really started to take over the economy. At the time, we did not believe that trading was a bad way to get stuff, and we knew people traded a lot in D2, at least the hardcore players did, and we kind of wanted to have them have a safe experience. It ended up becoming the way to get items, and so everything that Reaper of Souls is doing in the item system is preparing also for the cutting of the auction house. The auction house accomplished that goal I mentioned earlier, that everybody gets to drive the Lamborghini, but it accomplished it in such a way that all you had to do was pay over a little bit of gold or real money, and then boom, you had the Lamborghini. There was no story there. It wasn't like, hey, I killed Belial on Monster Power 10, and I got this legendary, and me and my friends did this and that, and this is how I got it. It's rather like I used an interface, and then I instantly had the item, and then it's not fun anymore. And at the end of the day, some people do really enjoy trading stuff. Some people like playing the auction house like an eBay simulator and min-maxing things and didn't even go into the game that much and cornered markets. But that's not the game we made, and that's not the game we were trying to make, and that's why the auction house was a huge, like, holy crap moment for us. The game we want to make is one where you kill monsters to get items. not you get items to kill monsters, if that makes any sense. Like the cart came before the horse there. Trading became something which was, instead of just filling in some cracks in the game, became the way. Absolutely not what we want. We want you to have a story. Every time you get an item, it's because you killed something. So we couldn't just shut down the auction house and then leave the game as it was, because it was probably too hard for people to get items. Not everybody had access to the Lamborghinis without playing way more than maybe they had time to. So everything else about Loot 2.0, those guaranteed legendary drops, all that stuff about your plus class skills on the items, the enchanting system, the transmogrify, just being more generous with stuff. We basically, the short version is we give more or fewer better things. So there's less trash items going through your inventory, and all the crafting economy is tuned around that as well. The stuff you get has a lot more chance to be smart dropped as well, so that it is something that's going to be good for you, or almost good enough that you can enchant it to be something. So once all those things were in place, then we felt comfortable cutting the auction house, which is about to happen. That's the biggest lesson learned for us. And I would say the other one, the other main one, which I've already alluded to, is using randomness more effectively. So making randomness equal replayability in a more fun way, and that's what most of the rest of the game is about.
And you bring up an interesting point too, because obviously games are for fun, but they're also at the same time like a business. How do you sort of balance that point in terms of like revenue versus gameplay, in terms of in-game stuff, like the auction house? How do you sort of approach that to make sure that you don't go like too much into one direction, I guess?
Well, the core, I mean, the way our model is set up is pretty straightforward, right? We provide the BattleNet service and the game in exchange for X number of dollars and whatever you paid for Diablo III, and this is the game you want. And then as per the usual Blizzard thing, we're going to continue to support that afterwards. The auction house was never... It was, I mean, really, it was trying to find people have a safe place to do it. At the end, like in Diablo II, when it did have a trading economy, it was kind of a mess. It was like people would sit in trading channels all day looking to trade something specific, so it wasn't like even a fun way to trade, but they would do it because they enjoyed it, or more likely because they had no other way of completing that set. Like Diablo III, at some points in the way that we balanced it, Diablo II has required an incredible amount of hours of farming over and over again and methodically in a pretty boring way to try to keep upping your chance of getting what you wanted. So when we set out to set up the auction house, the goal was that the amount that was taken for the Blizzard fee was just enough to keep it running, and that was accomplished. So we weren't torn between any sort of revenue source and doing what was best for the game. I would say it probably cost us more overall than we got out of it. Rather, it was what was going to be best for the play experience, because we are making a game, and I think that Blizzard's had a very rich history of making the game as good as it can be, and after launch continuing to support robust support no matter which game you're talking about. We keep supporting it afterwards because we know that the best laid plans, meeting millions of players, we always are going to learn something. So we always plan for long support schedules after that. That focusing on that quality, and wherever the quality is not meeting up to snuff, keep working on it no matter how long it takes to make it do that. That's the best way to keep your business successful for us, that the quality comes first. In fact, that's actually the main philosophy of the company, is gameplay first. That's what everybody says pretty much about everything. So in this case, Reaper of Souls, once we figured out the key to getting rid of that trading without losing all of the stuff that having the auction house did bring, and it wasn't about revenue. I mean, all the safe places to trade, the ability for people to try out the best gear, that sort of thing. When we found a way that you could do that by playing the game, then it was a no-brainer, and that was the intent. It just took us a while to figure all that out.
No one can stop death.